This video is sponsored by the Sexy Brutale.
Overwatch might look like it's all bright colors and peppy British girls. But there are some pretty disturbing elements hidden in the game itself and the lore surrounding it. Reinhardt is the larger-than-life knight on a quest through Europe to fight for justice and to defend the innocent. But there's a pretty good chance he's also completely insane.
Hey, Salhoff is my hero! I love Knight Rider!
During the Reinhardt comic Dragon Slayer, we join him and his young squire Bridget as they fight to liberate a town from a group of raiders who have been pillaging the area. On the first page, we see Reinhardt gets a little carried away with the name of the gang, the Dragons, and Bridget mentions his active imagination. When we finally get to the big showdown, we get a panel that seems to show what Reinhardt is seeing, and rather than the motorcycle gang, he sees an actual fire-breathing dragon as well as some humanoid lizard people on horseback. Whether childlike wonder or psychosis is up to you to decide.
What was that? I should kill everyone and escape? Sorry. The voices.
Let's get serious for a second. The man was part of a German military prior to founding Overwatch, and then a key part of their military for a further 2.5 decades, and he's still fighting today. He's been in a non-stop tour of duty for around 40 years. The things the man must have seen and done would surely have taken a toll on his psyche. Friends and allies gunned down in front of him, innocent lives lost, the fallout from the Omnic crisis, not to mention the countless humans and Omnics he himself must have killed. It's not even like he uses a firearm to distance himself from the death and destruction. He chooses to smash his victims into a bloody pulp with a goddamn massive-ass hammer. At this point, could he actually be suffering from something along the lines of PTSD? Maybe his apparent hallucinations are the result of head trauma suffered in the line of duty, or perhaps he has always had the mind of a child, too rudimentary to comprehend the horrors he has witnessed. With this in mind, his chipper personality and overactive imagination potentially take on a much darker tone. Let's just hope he's the type of guy who happens to be a great warrior with an overbearing sense of justice and an overactive imagination. It seems the comics are home to the creepiest elements of the game's lore, such as in Farah's book, where it was revealed that trapped inside the Temple of Anubis is a godlike AI. For decades, Anubis has been locked away as humanity sought to stifle his malevolent intent, and with each passing year, his fury has grown along with his power. During the comic, we see him attempt to escape, corrupting nearby Omnics and even driving one character to commit suicide to avoid his control. Eventually, he is subdued by Farah and her team, for now. Anubis, however, does not rest. He desires only to escape the firewalls which hold him and once again bend the will of the innocent Omnics to his own. If he is able to one day breach the defenses, this god program could cause untold devastation across the planet. Nuclear launch codes, financial markets, hospitals, everything connected to the web would be at Anubis's malevolent fingertips. And most creepy of all, according to the comic, there are many more god programs just like this locked away throughout the world, all just itching to unleash their wrath on humanity.
When I was a girl, I had a fear of spiders.
Widowmaker was once a young woman by the name of Amelie. She was the wife of a prominent Overwatch agent who was working to bring down the terrorist organization Talon. To put an end to the agent, Talon kidnapped his wife and subjected her to an intense program of neural reconditioning. They turned her into a sleeper agent and sent her to kill her beloved husband. But they weren't done yet, and following the murder, they continued to warp the woman into the ultimate weapon, the Widowmaker. Now, if that isn't disturbing enough, it actually gets worse. The process to transform Amelie into Widowmaker also stripped her of her emotions, including remorse. Meaning, in theory, she feels nothing for the death of her husband at her own hand. However, in the Overwatch comic from Christmas, we see her at the grave of her late husband, apparently mourning his death. This implies the brainwashing is actually failing, and Amelie, the innocent girl, could be finally facing the years of blood on her hands.
Last question, Dolores. Have you ever heard a living thing?
It's not just Widowmaker with a disturbing backstory either. Tracer's lore isn't much better. She was the youngest pilot ever to be inducted into Overwatch's experimental flight program. However, while testing one of their prototype aircraft, she was involved in an accident and vanished along with the plane. For months, she was presumed dead. Eventually, she reappeared, but no one knows where she went or what had happened to her. Although she was back, her body had become desynchronized from the flow of time. She was like a living ghost who would disappear for hours or days at a time. Even in the moments she was present, she was unable to maintain a physical form. Imagine the fear and loneliness she must have felt as being a living ghost, unable to touch, to feel. Now compound that with whatever was happening to her when she wasn't visible. She doesn't talk about what occurred during those periods of time. Perhaps her mind has blocked off the memories to shield her. Judging by a line from her character in Heroes of the Storm, it sounds like she was flying through time.
Being lost in time was really scary. Sometimes I'd have these strange dreams about the olden days, like I was a kitchen maid in this grand house in the country.
Eventually, Winston was able to ground her in time through the use of his chronal accelerator and save her from a fate truly worse than death. At this point, no one would blame Tracer for wanting nothing more to do with Overwatch, but the young girl instead chose to harness the effects of her trauma and become a full Overwatch agent. At such a young age, Tracer has suffered more than most people will in their whole lives, but perhaps this is what drives her to protect others from the pain she has felt firsthand. Of course, a list of disturbing things in Overwatch couldn't be complete without the edgiest character in the game, Reaper.
The grave cannot hold me.
That is a line Reaper says upon respawning. It's believed that the genetic experiment that warped Gabriel Reyes into Reaper has actually made him unable to die, but also trapped in a constant state of near-death. Reaper's cells simultaneously decay and regenerate at a hyper-accelerated rate. Cell decay is essentially the process of dying, so while the regenerating keeps him alive, the decay means he's constantly suffering the pain of death. He blames Overwatch for his condition, in particular its ex-leader Soldier 76. So, was the experiment performed on him by Overwatch? Was it done with his consent, or while he lay on the verge of death in the wreckage of the Swiss headquarters? When you think of the agony this man must be in every single day, you can almost forgive his sour disposition. Another rather disturbing situation in the world of Overwatch is what's going on in Australia. While the rest of the world seems to have recovered fairly well since the end of the Omnic crisis, the Australian outback has descended into what is essentially a Mad Max movie. Populated by the Junkers, this is a lawless society that seems to have been abandoned by the rest of the world to slowly slip into insanity. Junkrat is just one of many men and women living in the irradiated wasteland. The radiation is warping both in mind and body, turning them into killers, madmen, and abominations. As time goes on, things will only get worse, and Junkrat and Roadhog won't be the only Junkers to leave the outback. Others will follow, and behind them will come a wave of devastation and death. Another insane piece of Overwatch lore is what is taking place on the moon. The Horizon Lunar Colony was established to give humanity its first step back towards the stars, but it didn't take long for things to go horribly wrong. One of the experiments involved studying the effects of prolonged exposure to life in space on a group of genetically enhanced gorillas. A young baby ape was part of the experiment and was cared for by the scientist Dr. Harold Winston. Harold became a surrogate father to the young gorilla, caring for him, teaching him science, and a love for the planet Earth. However, the other apes on the station did not have the same feelings towards the humans, and one day they turned on their captors, killing the scientists, including Harold. The young ape had lost his father, and his relationship with the humans made him a target for the other gorillas. He was alone, afraid, and trapped on the moon with a horde of enraged gorillas who wouldn't think twice about tearing him into pieces. Thankfully, his enhanced intelligence and scientific knowledge allowed escape to Earth, but even here he remains different and somewhat isolated. Overwatch has become his home and he made a friend in Tracer. Perhaps the two could appreciate the loss and loneliness they had both suffered. But with Overwatch gone, Winston is once again alone, except for the company of his AI assistant. And what happened to the moon base? Well, as far as we know, it's still home to a race of enhanced and enraged gorillas with an overwhelming hatred for humanity, biding their time and just waiting for the opportune moment to unleash their fury. Do you know any more disturbing lore in the world of Overwatch? Let me know in the comments below. As always, this is Jason for Curse saying thanks for watching and enjoy the game.
Brought to you by the Sexy Brutale, a never-ending masked ball featuring intrigue, murder, and quite possibly the occult.